In the year 989 AD, the fate of an empire hung by a thread. Emperor Basil II, ruler of the Romans, sat uneasily upon his throne in Constantinople. His empire was fractured by civil war. Threatened by powerful enemies on every frontier, and betrayed by the very generals sworn to protect it.
We proceed at dawn.
In the palaces of Constantinople, whispers of doom grew louder with each passing day. Nobles plotted, rebels gathered armies, and the once mighty Byzantine Empire seemed poised to collapse. Like a storm rolling in from the distant north, 6,000 warriors arrived. They were unlike any the Byzantines had seen before, towering men with pale hair and piercing blue eyes, clad in heavy mail, bearing shields of iron and great two-handed axes. These were the Varangians, mercenaries sent by Prince Vladimir of Kiev, a prince who had traded men for marriage, power, and faith. With their arrival, Basil's enemies would be crushed in a single night of fire and slaughter. And with them, the empire would gain something more than just soldiers. It would gain a brotherhood of warriors who would serve as the emperor's most loyal guardians for nearly 4 centuries. This is their story. Historical background. Rome's Roman Empire had risen from a single city-state on the Tiber to rule the Mediterranean world. For centuries, its legions had conquered kingdoms, crushed rebellions, and brought vast lands under imperial rule. But empires do not last forever. By the 3rd and 4th centuries AD, Rome was buckling under its own weight. To preserve the realm, Emperor Diocletian divided the empire into East and West, a pragmatic decision that would shape the course of history. When the Western Roman Empire fell in the late 5th century, the East endured. Centered in Constantinople, it claimed the mantle of Rome while forging its own destiny. This was the Byzantine Empire, rich, sophisticated, and powerful, yet constantly beset by enemies. The Byzantines inherited not only Rome's ambition, but also its need for soldiers. The Mediterranean world of the 10th century was no place for complacency. From the east, the Fatimid Caliphate pressed into Syria. From the west, the Holy Roman Empire watched hungrily. From the north, Slavs and steppe nomads threatened the frontier. The Byzantine army was strong, but it was changing. Gone were the vast legions of antiquity. In their place stood the thematic system, provincial levies, farmer soldiers bound to their land but called upon in times of war. Supporting them were elite regiments of cavalry and infantry stationed near Constantinople. But in an age of betrayal, where generals and nobles often schemed against their own emperor, there was a pressing need for soldiers who were loyal to nothing, and no one, except the emperor himself. This would be the role the Varangians filled. Key figures Basil II and Vladimir of Kiev, the heart of the Varangian story, stands Emperor Basil II, later known as the Bulgar Slayer. But when the Varangians first entered history, Basil's throne was anything but secure. He had come to power young, and the empire quickly descended into chaos. His throne was challenged by powerful generals, including Bardas Phocas and Bardas Skleros, men whose armies threatened to topple him. It was at this moment that Basil turned to the north. His ally was Vladimir of Kiev, ruler of the Rus. Vladimir was a shrewd prince with ambitions of his own. He sought both legitimacy and power, and Basil's offer provided both. Terms were simple. Vladimir would send Basil 6,000 of his fiercest warriors. In exchange, Basil would give Vladimir his sister Anna in marriage, the ultimate mark of prestige, for Byzantine princesses were rarely given to foreign rulers. But there was one more condition. Vladimir would convert to Christianity, and in doing so, bring his entire people into the faith. Thus, out of political desperation and diplomatic cunning, an alliance was forged. Out of this alliance, the Varangian Guard was born. Birth of the Varangian Guard. When the 6,000 warriors arrived in 989, they were not like the soldiers of the empire. They were giants from the north, wielding axes that could cleave a man and horse in two. They came from the lands of the Rus, from Scandinavia and from beyond, adventurers who sought fortune in the city they called Miklagard, the Great City. Basil unleashed them upon his enemies. At the Battle of Abydos, the Varangians tore into the rebel forces of Bardas Phocas with ferocity that shocked even their Byzantine allies. Rebels were hacked apart, their lines broken, their leaders crushed. In a single campaign, the rebellion was destroyed. And with it, the Varangians proved their worth. From that day onward, Basil kept them close, not merely as mercenaries, but as his personal guard, tied directly to him by gold, loyalty, and blood. Thus began the Varangian Guard, an institution that would stand for nearly 400 years. And structure and composition NTHE Varangian Guard was not. Their only loyalty was to the emperor himself. Most were Scandinavians and Rus in the early years. Later, after 1066, their ranks swelled with Anglo-Saxons, who fled England after the Norman conquest. Chroniclers speak of entire fleets of exiles arriving at Constantinople's harbors, eager to trade their swords for Byzantine gold. Their weapons made them feared above all others. The Byzantines called them pelekiphoroi, axe-bearers, for their trademark was the great two-handed Danish axe. With it, a Varangian could split shields, crush armor, and mow down cavalry. Their armor was equally formidable. Long chainmail shirts, later upgraded to lamellar armor. Ornate helmets decorated with gold and silver. Large kite shields bearing both Nordic and Byzantine designs. Some even wielded the fearsome rhomphaia, a Byzantine polearm whose curved blade could slice through enemy ranks. To their enemies, they seemed like a wall of iron and fury. To their emperors, they were a guarantee of survival. And they were richly rewarded. A Varangian earned 30 to 40 times the pay of a common worker, not including plunder. After battles, they were often the first allowed to loot captured cities. And upon the death of an emperor, tradition allowed them to pillage his private treasury, a bonus that ensured loyalty until the very end. It was, in every sense, a Viking's dream. Campaigns and battles in the Varangian Guard quickly became the hammer of the empire, thrown against enemies wherever the fighting was fearsome. Bulgar Wars, 986, 1018, NFOR decades. The Bulgars had resisted Byzantine domination. But with the Varangians at his side, Basil II launched a relentless war. Climax came in 1014 at the Battle of Clydion. Basil trapped the Bulgar army in a narrow pass, encircling them. In the aftermath, he ordered thousands of prisoners blinded, sending them back in groups led by one sighted man. When the Bulgar Tsar saw his mutilated soldiers, he collapsed and soon died. From then on, Basil was known as the Bulgar Slayer. The Varangians had been there at his side, their axes red with blood. East and beyond NTHE Guard fought in Syria against the Fatimids, in Armenia and Georgia, and even as far as Italy at the Battle of Cannae in 1018. They became a permanent fixture of imperial campaigns. To face the Varangians was to face the emperor's wrath made flesh. Manzikert, 1071, and at the catastrophic Battle of Manzikert, the Byzantine army collapsed under the onslaught of the Seljuk Turks. Betrayals and panic doomed the battle, but one unit held firm, the Varangians. They fought desperately around Emperor Romanos IV, refusing to abandon him even as the army crumbled. Outnumbered and surrounded, they were cut down almost to the last man. Dyrrhachium, 1081, and a decade later, they faced the Normans of Robert Guiscard. At first, they broke the Norman lines, their axes smashing through men and horses alike. But they pressed too deep, cut off from support. Surrounded, they made their last stand in a burning church, perishing in flames rather than surrendering. Such moments only enhanced their reputation. Warriors who would die to the last man before abandoning their emperor. Beroia, 1122. At the Battle of Beroia, the Varangians smashed through the wagon fort of the Pechenegs, collapsing their defenses and securing victory. Even after centuries of service, they remained a weapon of last resort, unbreakable, unstoppable, and utterly loyal. Life in Constantinople, NTHE Varangians were not only warriors, they were part of Constantinople's daily life. They lived in their own quarters near the palace and even had their own church, Our Lady of the Varangians, near the Hagia Sophia. They patrolled the streets, guarded imperial ceremonies, and served as the emperor's ever-present shadows. Chroniclers note their love of Greek wine and their notorious drunkenness, with some even attacking emperors in fits of rage. They were also feared. They served as prison guards and torturers in the dreaded Numera prison, their voices described by poets as the howls of demons. Still, to the common people, their sight, towering northern warriors in gleaming armor, was a reminder that the emperor was never unprotected. Decline and transformation NBY the 12th century, the Guard had changed. The original Scandinavian core gave way increasingly to Anglo-Saxons, exiles who had lost their homeland to Norman rule. The Byzantine chroniclers now describe the Guard as axe-bearing Englishmen. But Byzantium itself was weakening. The treasury grew thin, the army shrank, and the empire leaned ever more heavily on mercenaries. Final blow came in 1204 during the Fourth Crusade. When Latin crusaders besieged Constantinople, the Varangians defended the walls with axe and shield. But the city fell, and with it the prestige of the Guard, NFOR, time. Remnants of the Varangians continued in the fragmented successor states, such as the Empire of Nicaea. But by the mid-13th century, their story fades into silence. Conclusion/legacy NFOR, nearly 400 years. The Varangian Guard stood as the shield of Byzantium. They were more than mercenaries. They were symbols of loyalty in an age of betrayal. From the fjords of Scandinavia to the markets of Kiev, from the valleys of Bulgaria to the walls of Constantinople, their legends spread. They were outsiders who became the heart of an empire. Vikings who traded longships for golden armor. Exiles who became heroes. Though the Guard itself disappeared, their memory endures in sagas, chronicles, and the stones of Constantinople. Varangian Guard remains one of the most extraordinary military brotherhoods in history, proof that loyalty, once bought, can sometimes be priceless.